Okay guys, it's DVD and Blu-ray update time. So, I've been gone for 3 months nearly. The plan was to do a November video. Didn't really buy a lot in November, so it wasn't really worth it. December was absolutely crazy. And then this is the January one as well, because I'm so late getting started up. So where did we leave off? Well, the last thing I told you about was my DVD advent calendar. So every year, get 24 cheap DVDs, wrap them up in Christmas paper, and then each day in December I get to open a film a day. This year we had a theme, and the theme was nostalgia. So great comedies from the 80s, stuff I used to have on video, action films I used to rent out in the early 90s, that type of thing. So without further ado, and this is not the order that I opened them in, here we have Cyborg. Probably the worst Jean-Claude Van Damme film from his original run. I hadn't seen this since back in the day, and I rewatched it recently, and yes, it's still awful. So this was apparently made with some of the costumes and funding that was meant to be in the second Masters of the Universe movie from Canon. When that fell through, and another film they were doing, I think it was a Spider-Man movie, they made this instead, and by God is this terrible. Even by Van Damme standards, this is just awful. I was hoping after all these years it might have some kind of retro charm, but seriously, it just does not. Next up we have the first film that I actually remembered not liking from Van Damme. I think I hadn't seen Cyborg when I saw this. I'd seen AWOL and Kickboxer and Bloodsport, thought they were brilliant, and then along came Death Warrant, and I just didn't like it. Not holding out much hope for it, but you never know, and it was part of the Van Damme collection, so we had to get it, Death Warrant. Now, where Jean-Claude Van Damme did get it right was with Bloodsport. This was his movie breakthrough, and one of the best of the early Van Damme movies. It's actually a real pain to get hold of on DVD. I had 2, 3 and 4, no problem at all. They're on really cheap, easy to get DVDs, but Van Damme's not in them. This one I had to get from the States, and I think it might even be full screen. It is a widescreen version, but it is region 1 locked, so definitely a multi-region only for that one. But there you go, Bloodsport. And my favourite Van Damme movie from the early run, AWOL, Absent Without Leave. This is the very first Van Damme movie, I think, that I ever saw, and I absolutely loved it. I was horrified at some of the scenes with his brother getting burnt alive. I'd never seen anything like that when I was a kid. But the action was awesome in this film. And again, I don't think I've seen this in 20 years at least. So I'm looking forward to revisiting that one. AWOL. Next up, Double Impact. I remember the day this got released on video for rental, and I rented it out. And my video player chewed the tape up as soon as I put it in. I was panicking. I was only a kid, and if you remember back then, brand new rental VHS tapes were about £50 or £60, and I was convinced I was going to get caught. I didn't, thankfully. The film itself wasn't that great. It was better than Death Warrant, I thought, but not one of Van Damme's best. And the final Van Damme from the advent calendar was, of course, Hard Target. This was sort of the last in the era of the great Van Damme movies. And I seem to remember, wasn't this cut back in the UK at the time? I'm not 100% sure, but here we have it on DVD. This is when John Woo first came to the States, and it was probably one of his better ones, but nowhere near up to the standard of his Hong Kong work. Changing tack completely, we have Michael Caine and Sean Connery in The Man Who Would Be King. So this is based on a Rudyard Kipling story, and it's about 2 British soldiers in colonial India who make a pact to lay off women and booze and become kings. They go around the local villages, win little victories for them, band them all together, and eventually they start thinking that Sean Connery is the son of Alexander the Great. Obviously this goes to Sean Connery's head and he starts going a bit mental. It's an absolutely brilliant film from the 70s. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it. It's a great Sunday afternoon adventure. Next up, a movie from the 90s, Kevin Costner in Waterworld. This was of the era when Kevin Costner couldn't make a film that was under 3 hours long. This was billed as Mad Max on the water, and I seem to remember this was one of the biggest flops in Hollywood history. It cost an absolute fortune to make, and it really didn't do too well at the box office. I quite enjoyed the film though, especially Dennis Hopper as the villain. Next up, a real blast from the past, The Neverending Story. I remember renting this out for my auntie's Betamax, I think it was, back in the mid-80s. This was absolutely brilliant when you're a little kid. It was a really good fantasy movie. It was a little bit slow at times, but it had lots of great characters. Some really disturbing scenes in it. It also has a very memorable soundtrack from Giorgio Moroder. Really liked this one as a kid. Next up we have John Candy in his very last film. This is the one that he was making when he died, Wagons East. It was a really sad time when John Candy died. It was just over 20 years ago now. I was a huge John Candy fan. This was the film he was making at the time, and it got released a little bit later. Another one I haven't seen since back in the day, Mel Gibson and Goldie Hawn in Bird on a Wire. I was always a big Mel Gibson fan, and definitely loved Goldie Hawn in films like Private Benjamin and Wildcats. And this was one of those 80s action comedy buddy movies that was so popular back then. It's been so long, I can't remember a thing about this film, but looking forward to checking it out. Next up, a film I don't think I've ever seen at all, but the nostalgia for me in this is seeing the video cover for the likes of this. I remember renting out Blind Fury, I loved that film. Split Second was good, but I saw that later. So this is Rutger Hauer in Wanted, Dead or Alive. Rutger Hauer made a lot of cheap action movies back in the 80s. To be honest, I think I've enjoyed every one I've seen, so Wanted, Dead or Alive. This next one came from the early 90s, but I definitely remember having this on video. Woody Harrelson and Randy Quaid in Kingpin. From the directors of There's Something About Mary. Don't think I'd seen that at the time. Bill Murray's in this. It says on there, Bill Murray is funnier than ever. He is good, I don't think it's his best role. Randy Quaid was excellent though. Daft comedy about bowling. Kingpin. Next up is one of the most brilliantly funny and heartwarming comedies from the 1980s. The Dream Team, starring Michael Keaton, fresh off Batman, Christopher Lloyd, fresh off Back to the Future, Peter Boyle, and Stephen Furst. Four nutjobs let loose in New York when their minder gets attacked on the way to a baseball game. You've got Michael Keaton playing the psycho, Christopher Lloyd playing the anal retentive, thinks he's a doctor guy, Peter Boyle, the advertising executive who thinks he's Christ, and Stephen Furst playing a catatonic character who only speaks in baseball commentary talk. This film was so good. I haven't seen this in a long time and I rewatched it over Christmas. It's absolutely fantastic. This is where the 80s got it right. They were funny, they were charming, and they had so much heart and soul. I defy anybody not to like the Dream Team. And for those of you who've only seen Michael Keaton in recent stuff or as Batman and Beetlejuice, definitely give this a watch because he's really good. Next up we have another comedy from the early 90s. This is Michael J. Fox in Doc Hollywood. So Michael J. Fox, he's playing a Beverly Hills plastic surgeon and he crashes his car in the backwoods somewhere. And as part of his punishment, he has to be the local doctor. And it's the story about how he ends up realising that Beverly Hills life isn't what it's cracked up to be. Not one of his best films from the time, I admit, but I used to have this on video and I've seen it a lot, so it definitely holds a lot of nostalgia for me. Next up, one of the worst comedies of all time. This is Night Patrol. So this is Police Academy, but more lowbrow. It does feature Linda Blair from The Exorcist, but that's not saying a lot because she's made some awful films. I'm not going to tell you too much about this, but it falls somewhere between Porky's and Police Academy without the sophistication. Next up we have the all-star classic from Ron Howard. This is Parenthood, starring Steve Martin, Rick Moranis, Keanu Reeves, Jason Robards, Mary Steenburgen, and various others. It's not like a lot of the 80s comedies, it's got a little bit more drama in it. But I used to have this back on VHS when I first started buying them. And Steve Martin, for the first 20 years of his career, was absolutely untouchable. And we have another film from Ron Howard. This one is Night Shift, starring Henry Winkler, Michael Keaton in a very, very early role, and Shelley Long. So this one is a comedy set in a morgue, one of the earlier films directed by Ron Howard, not long after his days with Roger Corman. I haven't seen this for such a long time. So this version of Night Shift, this is the US release, and it's Region 1, so multi-region only, I'm afraid. Not sure if this had a release in the UK, I've never seen one. But anyway, it's a great comedy from the very early 80s, Night Shift. This next film was one of a number of team-ups from two of the greatest comedic actors of all time. Absolutely no denying it. Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder in See No Evil, Hear No Evil. This was the third teaming of the pair. They'd first done Silver Streak together, and then they did the classic Stir Crazy, and finally at the end of their careers they made Another You. So the high concept in this comedy, Richard Pryor is blind, Gene Wilder is deaf, and they get accused of a murder. This is definitely a classic from the 80s, and I'd definitely advise seeing it. Next up we have another classic from our video renting days. This one is My Cousin Vinny. So this is an early 90s comedy starring Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid, and Joe Pesci. So there's these two lads, they're in Alabama, and they get accused of robbing a gas station, which they didn't do. Fred Gwynne is the judge, who played Herman Munster. Basically the two lads are in big trouble, but luckily they have a lawyer in the family who turns up, and it's Joe Pesci, straight out of Brooklyn. I think he's a car dealer or something, where he's trying to become a lawyer. Typical Joe Pesci comedy. This film was great back in the day. Next up, one I always remember seeing the box for, but never actually watched it, The Hard Way. This turned up, it's actually a German DVD, but the disc plays perfectly in English, so I'll keep it for now. Michael J. Fox and James Woods. So James Woods is the hard-boiled cop, a bit like Clint Eastwood type of character. Michael J. Fox is playing a Hollywood diva type of actor who wants to be a cop, and he's researching his role and tags along with James Woods. I hadn't actually seen this until recently, and I really did enjoy seeing Michael J. Fox back in his prime. James Woods, as ever, is excellent. I definitely recommend this one, The Hard Way. Next up we have another Bill Murray comedy classic, Quick Change. Now this is a weird looking cover. This does not remind me of the Quick Change that I remember. But if I turn it around, and I'll show you that picture of Bill Murray dressed as a clown, this may come back to you. This is all about a bank robbery that goes wrong. Bill Murray, Gina Davis and Randy Quaid. This one's actually co-directed by Bill Murray as well. This was a great comedy from, I think it's 1990. I wouldn't say it's up there with Bill Murray's best work, like Ghostbusters and Scrooged and all those, but it's definitely worth checking out. Quick Change. And the final piece in the advent calendar was Chris Farley, Beverly Hills Ninja. For those of you who don't remember Chris Farley, probably his biggest role was in Wayne's World. He was also on Saturday Night Live, and he made a few films with David Spade, most notably Tommy Boy and Black Sheep. And this is one he did on his own, where he's playing some dumb kid in Beverly Hills, and he's obsessed that he's a ninja. And you take one look at Chris Farley and yeah, he's no ninja. Just a really stupid comedy from the 90s. But Chris Farley sadly passed away many, many years ago, so he didn't really get to do many films, but the ones he did do are all worth checking out. So this one wasn't part of the advent calendar, but it definitely would have fit in with that. This is Robin Williams in Popeye. When you look at the picture of this on Amazon, it looks like it actually comes in a tin. When it turns up, it's not, it's just a picture of a tin, which is a little bit disappointing. Popeye, the film, not everybody likes. It has a personal attachment to me because I remember going to see Popeye's Village in Malta when I was little. They built it for the film and it's still there now, I think, even after all these years. Very daft musical from Robert Altman from really early on in Robin Williams' career. But definitely a family favourite, especially in this house. Popeye. Next up, quite a few titles I found cheap out and about. So this is Independence Day. I did own this, but it was in a cardboard sleeve and it was all trashed, so I thought I'd buy it again. 2-disc edition. I haven't seen this for a very long time. But for the price I paid, it was quite well worth picking up just for a nice new cover. So I've been on a bit of a Denzel Washington kick recently, especially after seeing The Equalizer. And I watched some of his other ones recently as well. This one is John Q. I haven't got around to this one yet, but we also have Robert Duvall, James Woods, and Ray Liotta, worthy of mention. Not sure what it's about really. I didn't really want to read the back and spoil it, but when I get around to seeing it, I'm sure I'll love it because Denzel's pretty good in most things. Next up, one I was going to put in the advent calendar, but when it turned up I realised I already had it anyway. So this is the US version of Liar Liar. Probably Jim Carrey's best film in my opinion. Wasn't a big fan of Ace Ventura and The Mask, and The Truman Show I didn't like at all. Next up, part of the Clint Eastwood collection. This one is a film he directed back in the early 70s. And this is Breezy, stars William Holden. Wow, he hasn't been around for a long time. He was in The Wild Bunch. I'm not really sure what it's about. I think it's more of a sentimental drama, but I like Clint Eastwood movies, and this one I hadn't seen. Next up, we have Jarhead. Not seen this one, but I've seen something with Jake Gyllenhaal recently, and it was quite good. What was it? Source Code. Yeah, that was the one. Also got Jamie Foxx as well, so that'll be interesting to see. Early role of Jamie Foxx. Looks like your typical Afghan war Call of Duty type film. But I'll give it a shot. Jarhead. Next up, one I haven't seen in a very long time, and this is one of the most interesting concepts for a film. I can't remember exactly how it works, but there's some kind of portal thing where if you look through it you see life as John Malkovich. Directed by Spike Jonze, the guy who made all those Fatboy Slim videos back in the day. And it does actually feature John Malkovich as well, so that was pretty good. Very, very weird film, and I'm interested to watch it again, because I haven't seen it since it came out. Next up, the sequel to The Fugitive, US Marshals. You know, I don't think I've ever seen this, but it's got Tommy Lee Jones, and he's always good. Wesley Snipes, Robert Downey Jr. Surely you can't go wrong. So, special edition. How special? This one features interactive menus, production notes, and scene access. Oh, and anatomy of a plane crash. So, like I said, I don't think I've ever seen this one. I like The Fugitive back in the day. That film was huge when it came out. This one was like the sequel without Harrison Ford. So that'll be interesting to see that one. US Marshals. Next up, a Vietnam movie I have never seen before. But this one goes back in my memory to Impact magazine. I used to see this on the listings for things you could buy on VHS, like mail order. That'll have been 91 or something. Vietnam movie, like I say, I've never seen it. Don't know who's in it really, let's have a look. It doesn't list anybody who's in it. But it is directed by John Irvin, and he made Raw Deal, so that's got to be a plus point for it. When I'm in my next Vietnam mood, this will be one I'll check out, Hamburger Hill. Next up, a Fight Factory film. This is a really cheap DVD label, but they do have some great stars in it. This one features Wesley Snipes, The Art of War 2 Betrayal. He's back and he wants revenge. These are the kind of cheap straight-to-DVD movies these stars have been forced to make to earn $1 these days, and it's really sad to see. But if they keep making them, I'll keep watching them. Coming to the end of the DVDs now. This one is Neverending Story 2. This was going to be in my advent calendar, but as you can see, it's one of those clipper boxes. And as that is a different shape to all the other boxes, I'd have known exactly which one it was, so that's why it didn't go in the calendar. Not as good as the original, but certainly a lot better than the awful Neverending Story 3, which I was forced to endure every day for 2 weeks when I was doing my work experience at a local cinema. And obviously I got this one to pair up with the original Neverending Story. I also found this one locally. This is Amityville The Evil Escapes, or Amityville 4. This is the original one that I remember seeing back in the day on TV, I think it was. And I remember it being great, but I haven't seen it since, back in the 90s. So looking forward to seeing that. Amityville, The Evil Escapes. And on to the last couple of DVDs to show you. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles complete Season 9. So this is the 9th series of the original Ninja Turtles series. So this will have come out in about 95, I think this one was. This is the US release because in Britain we can only get Season 1 and 2 in one little pack. Really annoying that, so you've got to get them from the States. These have all come out in a big box set that includes the van that's been deleted and costs a fortune. Don't waste your time, just get these little small sets. They work out about £3 including shipping from the States, so definitely worth getting. This one only features 8 shell-busting episodes, which isn't too bad. Some of the sets have a lot more, but this one, so cheap, just got it for the collection really. I'm only missing a couple of seasons now. And we have the complete final season of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So this is season 10. This is where it all ended for the original run. And this one features 8 episodes again. And a couple of bonus episodes from must be earlier on in the seasons. You don't really need them if you're buying all the DVDs though. I will say the picture quality on these is not brilliant. It'd be nice to see them do a remaster. And I think these are all on one disc, which is not going to help matters much. But there you go. The complete final season Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Moving on to Blu-rays, I found this locally. This is Manhunter, the Michael Mann movie that predates Silence of the Lambs. So obviously Hopkins isn't Hannibal Lecter in this one, it's Brian Cox. This film is still great though. I like any film with Hannibal Lecter in. Even Hannibal Rising I enjoyed. I haven't got around to seeing the new series though, I'm looking forward to seeing that eventually. But this is where it all began in the movies for Hannibal Lecter, Manhunter. Another local pickup, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but this is Attack the Block. And we've also got Nick Frost, who doesn't really do a lot in this film. It's kind of like he's in it so they can put his name on the cover. Shaun of the Dead, this film ain't, but it's definitely a great little British science fiction movie. And next up we have a film that I know a lot of people don't like. I thought it was quite good. Amazing Spider-Man 2. Yes, Jamie Foxx is totally over the top. and the plot is a bit daft, and Rhino is pointless. But the film overall, I think, is worth owning, and especially for the Marvel collection, you've got to get them all, haven't you? Amazing Spider-Man 2. And this is a Blu-ray I picked up from the United States. This is Nightbreed, the director's cut. The long-awaited, finally getting released Nightbreed on Blu-ray. They have done a real good job with this one. There were two versions. There was a super edition that was really, really expensive that came with a poster and a copy of the original cut. Well, you can get the original cut on DVD for pretty cheap, so I don't see the point of paying over the odds. This one is a Scream Factory release, so that's pretty nice. It is Region A locked, so you do need your multi-region Blu-ray. It does have DVD on it though as well, so if you've got a multi-region DVD, you could probably get away with it. Decent amount of special features on this. The picture looks great. I hadn't seen this one since back in the 90s. Somebody taped it off Sky for me. That was a long, long time ago. Not as scary as I remember. I remember this being terrifying, especially David Cronenberg's character. And the guy with the knife things in his face. I won't tell you anymore. But it really wasn't as shocking these days. And it's really great to see this film finally coming out on Blu-ray. This is definitely a lost classic. Clive Barker's Nightbreed. And next we move into Blu-ray Steelbooks. Zavvi had a sale on Black Friday and I got quite a few for like a £5 each. The Day the Earth Stood Still, this is the original one. The cover's not brilliant, it's like a budget title really. Nothing to see on the back whatsoever. I remember seeing this as a kid. I always thought it was a great sci-fi movie. I'm a big fan of the 50s stuff anyway. So it was definitely one of the titles that had to be picked up on Blu-ray. I haven't got around to watching it yet, but I'm sure it looks good for what it is. The Day the Earth Stood Still. In a similar vein, I also got The Fly. This is the original 1958 The Fly with Vincent Price. I like the Cronenberg, Jeff Goldblum one as well, but this one was the original. I remember seeing it a long, long time ago, and the ending to this one is far more terrifying than anything that you saw in the new one. I say new, I mean the one that's nearly 30, not nearly 60. But anyway, The Fly. Next up, we have a classic that everybody knows now, but for a long time people didn't. This is Vanishing Point. So this film was featured quite prominently on Tarantino's segment in the Grindhouse Double Bill, Death Proof. I always enjoyed this more because it had Cleveland Little from Blazing Saddles playing a DJ in this. The film stars Barry Newman, who you may remember from Petrocelli, the detective who was an architect that was building his house. It was a bit like a Columbo-era detective show, early 70s. Anyway, Vanishing Point, absolute classic, well worth picking up. This again, budget Blu-ray release, nothing flash, but worth seeing. Next up, a film I've seen kicking around for ages. This looked like it was going to be a cult classic, and it was so disappointing. So this one is about the Nazis. They went to the moon in 1945 and they're on the dark side, and cut forward to the future and we have a woman president and she sends some model up to the moon and the Nazis get him. The whole plot is just complete crap. I'm annoyed because I was really looking forward to this and I was thoroughly disappointed by it. So this one was a blind buy, and boy was I impressed with this film. This is Captain Phillips. This is a big hit last year about the captain of a cargo vessel going near Somalia and pirates take over, based on a true story. Absolute powerhouse performance as usual from Tom Hanks. He even does his little crying bit at the end. But the real stars of the show here were the Somali pirates. They were absolutely brilliant, especially the lead guy. He will go far. I won't tell you too much else about this film, but it's really tense. It's really great. Loved it. Captain Phillips. And another steelbook that I managed to pick up cheap in the Black Friday sales. This is Arrow's release of Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I've got a vague memory of this one from back in the day, but I'd never seen it. It's totally stupid, this film. Definitely a cult movie. More of a comedy than a horror. It really is just bizarre. Cheaply made, but very imaginative, and it's great to see movies like this getting a decent Blu-ray release. So the next 4 titles were actually bought by a buddy of mine for me for Christmas, and I was blown away. First up, Steelbook edition of RoboCop. The original RoboCop. So this is the remastered version in steelbook form. I do have the box set, but it doesn't have the remastered original one. Not sure on the extras, because it doesn't tell you I've put the slipcover inside. RoboCop's one of them films that I have a problem getting rid of old editions of, because they always seem to have other extras on. So I've still got the old DVDs and the Blu-ray box sets. And this one again. So I've got RoboCop 3 times now. Number 2 is the Expendables 3. So this is the Steelbook edition, which completes my Expendables Steelbook editions collection. We've been to see every single one of these at the cinema. This one's actually got a little bit more in it, but to be honest, I didn't really notice much. I did actually enjoy it more because I wasn't just pining for the original Expendables like you do when you first see this film. Mel Gibson's brilliant. Some of the other guys are a bit wasted though. Dolph Lundgren does nothing in this film. Terry Crews spends the whole time in hospital. Jason Statham's barely in it. Jet Li's got like 2 scenes. Arnie's barely in it. Harrison Ford was a big surprise though. He comes in to replace Bruce Willis's character. Yep, not everybody's cup of tea, I know. The Expendables 3. Next up, another one from my good buddy. This one is They Live. John Carpenter, classic movie starring Rowdy Roddy Piper. So I had this on DVD, and I think the extras are the same. The commentary's certainly the same, but it's great to have it on a Blu-ray Steelbook. My obsession with John Carpenter goes way, way back to the point when I discovered it was the same guy that made Big Trouble in Little China and Halloween and Escape from New York. In fact, I think that was around the time when I discovered what a director actually was. And John Carpenter made so many good movies in the 80s. And the final one my buddy got me, The Wolf of Wall Street. So, Martin Scorsese film, plus point right there. Leonardo Dicaprio's in it. Do you know, I used to dislike Leonardo DiCaprio. Around the time of Titanic, when everyone was going on and on and on about how great he was, I just couldn't stand the lad. And then he made a few films. What did he do? Catch Me If You Can and The Aviator, Gangs of New York. And now I think he's one of the greatest actors who ever lived. And this is a very daring film from Martin Scorsese. Really, really great performance by Matthew McConaughey, although he's not in it for very long and he doesn't come back, which is a shame. Really enjoyed this one. It's very much in the style of Goodfellas. It has a lot of talking to the camera, talking to the audience. And we're coming to the close now, guys. 2 more to show you. This is, of course, the extended edition of The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. So this one, as tradition goes, always comes out in November. And then we get to see the new movie, which I've already seen by now. I've got to say this extended version was a little different to what I was expecting. It actually has plot-changing scenes in it, things that are just different rather than extra, which was a bit weird. But I love the fact that we get an extended edition. And my biggest problem with the Battle of the Five Armies was it was too short. That was pathetic. That was like half a movie. I'm really hoping that they put a lot more in the extended edition. Unfortunately, we've got to wait till next November to see it. So, as is tradition, I always pick up the Steelbook in April when the theatrical comes out, and then I pick up the Steelbook 3D, 4-disc, whatever it is, version in November, just to round out the collection. But I have enjoyed watching the Hobbit movies. Martin Freeman has definitely made them great. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing the extended version of the Battle of the Five Armies. Really, really hoping there's a lot more added. Bjorn, especially, was just totally robbed in that movie. So as it is the final movie, as far as we know, that will feature Peter Jackson's Middle-earth, it would be nice to see them finish the job as it deserves to be. And finally, a box set I picked up around Christmas time, Game of Thrones Complete Season 3. So, I'm up to date with Seasons 1 and 2, I've just finished watching this one. It wasn't quite as good as the first season, I don't think they've ever recaptured that magic. But it is a great series. Definitely, I won't tell you anything about it, because if you've not seen it, you need to watch it fresh. Season 4 is already out on Blu-ray, so I'll be picking that one up next, in time for Season 5 being broadcast finally in about February, March time, I believe. Excellent series. If you've not seen it, definitely worth checking out, although not for the faint-hearted. And so there you go, guys. That is my Blu-ray and DVD update for November, December of 2014 and January of 2015. I did have a couple of titles that are still on the way and missed this update, but you'll get to see them next time. Hopefully back on schedule now in another 4 weeks' time. This has been Luke. Thanks for watching.